ready to gavel this to order?
Sure.
Boom. Amanda Duncan. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to first start off by apologizing for taking so damn long to reach back out and set this up. I'm very grateful you reached out. I think it was like a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. I was like, I want to talk to people, and you were like, okay. And then I just ghosted like 5 other people. You weren't alone, and it was not a purposeful ghosting. It happened. So I apologize, but we're here, and
It's good. It's completely fine. Honestly, the last few months have been insane. I mean, the last couple of weeks I've gotten a bit of a break from teaching, but
yeah.
Don't even worry about ghosting.
Well, anyway, I feel bad when it's like he offered to take somebody out to dinner, and then they're like, cool, you want to go on Thursday? And then I just don't respond for a month and a half. Like, that's just it. It's bad. So I'm trying to rectify it. Amanda, I'm curious, like, we can talk about whatever we want to, wherever we go today. I have no agenda. But I do sort of want to set up for folks who don't know you or me, maybe. I know about you. I think we met first at Cal State, CSU Long Beach. Is that right?
Yes.
Under the, I believe it was under the auspices of Tom Hassenflug that we saw your quartet with Yumi, right? Am I remembering correctly?
Yes. Yeah, that was right. We played Bixa for you guys. Yeah. So that was, I want to say 2008, maybe 2007, probably 2008.
13 years ago, Amanda Duncan.
Oh God, I know. Yeah, but we had the University Percussion Quartet at Cal State, and Yumi Tamashiro was in that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I know we both know Yumi. I know you know her very well.
Yeah.
And Danielle Collins was also in that group,
Yep.
and I think the other person for that masterclass was Risa Barrias, because he ended up being a new person in the quartet, Jeremy Cooley, but that was the original lineup when you came to us on Bixa.
Got it. Okay. Well, I'm curious. Now that you're a 13-year older version of Amanda Duncan, like what? Maybe this is too broad of a question, but like what? You also do a lot of stuff in the steel band world, which is another sort of tangent where you and I overlap. But I think I've not done anything with steel pan stuff with you. Oddly, it's mostly been Tom Hassenflug. But you're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, so it makes sense that we haven't crossed paths. But what would you say now, looking back over the last 13 years, is some things that you look back and you're like, I was right about that, and boy was I totally off base about that. Like, what are some things you've sort of self-diagnosed over the last decade and change?
Well, as for things that I got right, one of which is pan, that around the time, actually a little bit before you came to work with our quartet, a little before that was when I had, by the pan jumbie. I had played from when I started at Cal State in 2004, but I didn't truly fall in love with the instrument, like with a passion, until about 2008. So that was the beginning of when I really began my real journey with pan, and that's been one constant ever since. Is like no matter what musical setting I've found myself, whether as a performer, as a teacher, like pan has always been a consistent part of it. So that's one thing I got right. Thinking that I might keep going with this pan thing.
Well, before you get into the things that you did wrong, let's stay on the thing you did right. Who was it? Michael Carney, Dr. Michael Carney, that introduced you to the pan scene. Is that right?
Yes, the late Dr. Michael Carney. He is the one person who is responsible for, I would say, my career-wise, most of what I do now. Like, he taught me everything that most of what I know about pan, and his program really was incredibly influential. And of course, like, the way he ran the program at Cal State Long Beach was very comprehensive. All of us had to competency, and well, more than that, but we really all had to be good at percussion, drum set, percussion, steel pan,
Mm.
arranging, multiple percussion, kind of all the things that you
Yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah.
But his passion was pan, so I think that became my passion.
What was it? What is it about steel pan in particular that you feel like over the last 13 years has kept you sort of engaged and like why? I mean, I have answers for myself in terms of why steel pan is so important to me, but like why for you did it was it the thing that stuck after 13 years?
A couple things. First, it's just a beautiful instrument. It's just gorgeous. I mean, even all these years later, I mean, I know you've been playing pan for longer than I have, Josh, but um, you know, you know, however many, what's 2004? Is that 16 years, 17 years? I'm
Let's say
losing track.
let's say 17.
Good God. Okay. Yeah. So after 16, 17 years of playing this instrument, there's something that still gets me every time I hear it. So that's the thing. And this, I think, is has to do with the communal aspect of pan and how it's just a communal instrument, and beyond the notes and the technique and practicing and everything, there's that whole communal scene with the pan. And that's true in Trinidad, with the pan yards, or just with, the pan community in Southern California, people who I've met, or in the Midwest for that matter, because I went to NIU. And so I have connections and roots in the Midwest as well now. But I think the communal aspect is the other thing that keeps me involved. Like, I just love so much about the instrument.
It's one of those. I mean, I've now that I've gone through college program. I mean, the thing that's always interesting to me when I talk to students, students of mine or student like yourself, is that oftentimes people forget that like I was a student too, and I went through so percussion. Like we were all like in a practice room doing something and trying to figure out our way through things. When I was in school, it was like all that stuff fell under the umbrella of like world music, and then there was orchestral music. And the contemporary scene at that time, I mean, I was in school in 1998 is when I went to college, and John Cage was sort of like, on the collegiate scene, was like, you knew about him if you went to University of Cincinnati Conservatory, study with Al Oddie. Like there was like 5 people in the country that like were really pushing it, and that has now grown into like contemporary music within the educational system is now an entity that if you wanted to go and study and really, or even chamber music is a thing now that you can focus on. That wasn't the case when I was in school. And but in the world musics, for some reason, steel bands there's something, I don't know how to say it, but there's sort of an inherent cultural energy that for some reason within the steel bands is sort of just like humming in a way that I never experienced necessarily with like an A-way drumming group. Like we had that at the University of Akron, and we studied with Bernard Loma. Like I was at the horse's mouth with that stuff, and it was awesome, and I would not trade it for the world. But it was harder for me to plug in. I didn't know where to plug into that culturally in some weird way. Like I didn't have a natural in. And with steel bands, and the more I study it, the more I'm a believer that I think the origin story of the steel pan ensemble in Trinidad, I think it's baked into that. Like the steel drum would not have been invented. The steel pan would not have been invented if the community was insular and cut off, and nobody was sharing and helping each other out. Like it was always very much an inclusive thing. And so I think now 100 years later it's radiated out, and we have to be better as teachers and students to incorporate more culture into our teaching. But I'm just sort of like I'm agreeing with you, and I'm trying to figure out why steel pan in particular is something that when a student or a school starts one, it kind of works on its own in a way that other ensembles don't work. Like, and there's no I'm trying not to disparage like Afro-Cuban ensembles or anything like that because I don't know a lot about it. But in my experience with the steel band, it catches fire pretty quick, I guess is what I'm saying.
I would completely. And, you and I, we have such a similar background as far as our undergrad and experience. And I'm sure graduate to an extent as well. But yeah, at Long Beach, Pan fell under, like the world music
Yeah.
umbrella for percussion, the world percussion. And we were enrolled in the steel drum orchestra group and then the world percussion group, which for each semester, like the first quarter was a music and dancing and singing and drumming, and the second half was samba drumming, Rio style from Salvador
Yeah.
and everything. Um, and I learned Afro-Cuban in lessons with Reds. We never really had like a rumba ensemble. I never really got to experience that until I went to grad school, and then I also went to uh, Cuban folkloric music dance workshop in State. It was 10 years ago actually now.
Hmm.
But you're right. I mean, there's something a little bit more, I don't want to say translatable, but like, I'll put that in quotes, a little bit more translated to, I feel like the general populace, more than just percussionists who are going to university to study or who already play drums and just want to add another instrument to their arsenal. There's something about Pan that grabs people in. And I noticed this with my program that I direct at my high school where I teach.
Hmm.
And just something draws in people, some students, something draws in the audience. I don't know if it has to do with the tone or the communal aspect. I just don't quite get it, but I'm agreeing with you, agreeing with me, I think.
That's a good feeling to agree with somebody who agrees with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's something that's been on my, and I'm sorry, we're sort of diverging now off of what you. We'll get back to what you think you did poorly over the last 13 years in a second.
Which that's a whole can of worms, but okay.
Listen, I have a barrel of worms of stuff. I'm now 23 years removed from stuff, so you're in good company. But I'm curious, like, what do you feel is your one of the things for me, the older I get in the steel pan community, and I'm very grateful I teach at NYU, and which is a privileged situation for me in many respects, but the thing that's privileged about it that's different than NIU. Well, NIU is a bad example because it's like a huge Caribbean studio, like they're recruiting directly from. So maybe that's about it. But the University of Akron, my alum, like huge steel band culture there. But my exposure to Trinidadian artists, and I'm grateful for it, was directly through that program. But it was once a year. And so, I'd see Michael Spiro would come through, and, there'd be a lot of different guest artists, but it was like I met a Trinidadian once. At NYU, the second largest Trinidadian population in the world is a 5-minute subway ride away. And so, as time has gone on, I have felt a larger, and this was, I will say that this was pre-George Floyd, and the social move behind that murder in the last year. But prior to that, I started to have this like growing unease with, not like I'm a white guy teaching pan, because that sort of argument was never presented to me by a Trinidadian. So like when I was hearing it from people who were not Trinidadian, I was just like, you don't know what you're talking about. like this is not, you're barking up the wrong tree here. But I felt a growing responsibility to force exposure on my students to a thing that I never had an opportunity to have on a regular basis at Akron. And so what that's meant is like I've had to work a little harder to inject actual Trinidadian culture, Caribbean culture into the NYU program because of the proximity. Like for you, where you're at, and as you're growing as a player, where are you finding, if you are, I don't want to assume that you are either, and that I don't mean that as a good or a bad thing, but like what are you feeling are your sort of ethical responsibilities with the instrument, and in terms of how you present it to an audience or to colleagues or to other people of Caribbean descent? Like, what is your responsibility? How do you reconcile that in your head, and what do you do to sort of actively push that ball forward another inch or two?
It's a loaded question,
And well,
there's a lot to it. Um, I when I like you and I do gigs. In fact, I'm doing my first pan gig today, first one since before we shut down. So
yeah,
like,
girl, go do it.
I know, right? I've actually been thinking about these kinds of things, like as things start to return more to normal,
Mm-hmm.
these come back to mind. When I play, I always try, when the opportunity presents itself to tell people the instrument is from Trinidad, I don't go out and preach. I don't like have a sign up and like stand on the street corner like the pan's from Trinidad, not Jamaica. I don't do that.
Mhm.
And especially on gigs where like if you're going to play for a party, entertainment, you're not there to be a teacher. You're not there to preach. Like that's not your job.
Mhm.
But people come up and talk to me, and often, oftentimes they'll ask, "Well, where's the instrument from? Or is that amplified, electric? Like how is it made?" And there's a little opportunity to impart some knowledge that also can help dispel any stereotypes, preconceived notions, or myths, or whatever misunderstandings some people may have through their own, just because in American culture we don't always mostly don't identify Pan as being from Trinidad. And then as a teacher, first off, I always say to my students, when you leave this program, whether you stay in it for 1 year or 4 years, you can forget all the musical information I tell you. Like if you forget what a quarter note is, like whatever, but you better not forget where the pan comes from. You better that it's from Trinidad, and you better remember the story of the origins of the instrument struggle, the pioneers, everything. And if you remember that, but like maybe you forget some eighth notes or whatever, I will have done my job right.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, within a high school context with classes and everything, it's hard to teach as much about the culture and the players and the pioneers as much as I would like.
Mhm.
And I always I'm trying to figure out ways to do more of it.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of my classes this last year played piano, Liam's tune. And of course, the second Staw version has, lyrics all about the pioneers and the struggle and everything. And I picked that tune so I could have a better opportunity to teach more about the background, more about the history. Now, of course, it didn't quite play out as much as I hoped, because in the midst of the insane COVID teaching year with hybrid teaching and technology, it's like sometimes at the end of the day, I'm just trying to teach you guys notes. Like,
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm with you.
So
Yeah.
I had these lofty goals in my head. Use this, and this is the ultimate best teaching tool to impart students, and it didn't play out that way.
It's one of the. I mean, it's. I'm going to say something that is going to sound insensitive, but I think I stand by it. Like it was the. It's when the lofty ideals of what a society wants meet the reality of what society has, and yeah, like there were so many people being like, teachers need to be doing this, and why are we, blah blah blah, and like all of these new things were happening at a time when I was like, how do I share my screen? And like
Right?
I'm sharing, like I accidentally shared a chat thread once that I was just troll. Do you know Murray Mast at all?
Who? Wait, who?
Murray Mast.
I know the name.
Murray's a good friend of mine. He's a pan player.
Yeah.
I lived with him in Akron, and he's a great guy, and we gigged a lot. And I was on a Zoom call, but I was chatting with Murray and I was just trolling him and just calling him fat, like just dumb friend stuff, like fat shaming him. He fat shamed.
Just like.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't care. Yeah, shooting the shit, and I went to share something and shared the chat thread, and
no.
in front of my NYU students, and I realized it and shut it down before anybody noticed. And so yeah, it's like at that moment, yes, I want to be teaching culture, but I can't get my sound to come through on Zoom, and so it just this agonizing year of trying to put all this stuff in the same box was incredibly difficult. But I will say for me, the injection of history in culture has been something that was good, because I was online the whole year at NYU. We were remote up until the end of March, and so for the end of 2020 into this 2021, we were all online. So Kendall and I did a lot of watching Pan Am North Stars and talking about Tony Williams, and we read a book by Kim Johnson called From Timpan to Taspo, and it was really great. And now moving back into person, there's a part of me that in the fall wants to be well, while we're setting up the band, normally I'm just doing stuff, checking email. I pick a panorama and just have it playing on the big screen TV that's now in the studio and wasn't there the year before, you know. And let's just play the panorama. It's 8 minutes of the rehearsal. We can play it while we're setting up, talk a little bit about who Pelham Goddard is or whatever, and then, you know, next week we'll do Pan Earthquake, and then the week after that we'll do Fire Down Below, and the week after that we'll do a 2020 panorama by Devon Stewart. And just like, just start. You know, for sometimes the stuff I've learned has just been like, what's that painting? Like, and because somebody put the painting on the wall, I'm like, oh, cool. You know, Saul LeWitt. You know, and so if I can just put a painting on the wall that if 3 of my students over the course of the next 20 years actually get something from it and learn about Pelham Goddard or, you know, Ray Holman, okay, that I can deal with. Because the other reality is, like, when I'm in the room, yeah, they can't play eighth notes together. I could talk about the slave trade the whole year, which is terribly important, but they can't play
Yes.
together, so I have to deal with that too. And so how to juggle that it's a challenge.
For sure. I completely agree with all you've said, and I did all the things you did. Although I never accidentally shared a chat with like with someone. Although I do remember one time, because in addition to teaching steel band at my high school, Santa Margarita Catholic High School, I also teach AP Music Theory, which difficulty of trying to teach steel band, virtual and hybrid, all the things. Music theory was actually kind of my one saving grace. Like when stuff got so difficult and so hard, and I was like, I'm in over my head, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. But at least I can teach music theory. Like we can do online.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I was playing Queen of the Night aria, the Mozart aria. Just I was doing something with, like, you know, melismatic textures and things like that. And we were analyzing the piece, and I had meant to stop my video, and we were talking about it, but apparently I forgot to stop sharing the video, and I forgot to pause the video. So I'm talking to my class about, oh, this letter and this you know, these texture devices here, and apparently gone on to, like, the auto, you know, the play to, like, top 10 like most difficult arias for sopranos or something, and like my kids at home were like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I think this last year was charming, but I'm fine if I never have to teach another Zoom class. Like, there was a part of me at the beginning that was like, oh, this could be useful, and I feel like this is a tool I want to get good at. And after a year, I'm like, nah. It was like I had somebody gave me a sledgehammer at the beginning of the year and was just like, oh, you'll get better at swinging this. And now a year later, I'm like, yeah, I'm better at it, but I don't. It's still a sledgehammer.
Like I have no use for, like, swinging the sledgehammer on anything.
Yeah, I don't want to have to keep like, now I got to take it and put it in my car when I go somewhere, and then I've got to like no, I'm done. You all can swing the sledgehammers. I'm gonna go back to my scalpel, and, you know, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, it's like the people in CrossFit who do, like, these huge monster truck tire flips. It's like, that's cool, but, like, when are you going to use that? Like,
Listen,
what's the point?
Don't come crying to me when you're trapped under a tractor tire, Amanda Duncan.
But for the record, do that. I never have done CrossFit. I don't do any of that
I
stuff.
used to do strongman training, and we flipped.
Oh, really?
We flipped a few tires in my day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a useless skill. You're not.
I was gonna say I'm also quite tiny, so maybe I'm not even much stronger than I am. I'm not sure if I could ever do it. So I don't think I'm missing out on my.
Don't underestimate.
The tire's probably bigger than me.
Don't underestimate yourself, Amanda. Well, let me now ask you the second part of the first question, which was, what for you is something that you feel like you dropped the ball on in the last 13 years, or maybe not dropped the ball, but just misdiagnosed about, you know, your approach or something,
About my approach with Pan.
or just in general, like the way, like, what are some worldviews of yours that have been sort of nuanced over time that you've sort of identified?
I think the internal dialogue in my mind of being a player, like a performer, versus a teacher. And I have since begun to reconcile that, and I've come to the understanding about myself that No, I am both. I am a performer dash teacher and
Hmm.
can't do one without the other.
Hmm.
I have a passion for both. And I say that because there was, I think, about 5 year period from when I first got um, my full time at my high school where I teach. This was in 2014 was when I first started teaching there. So about a 5 period where I was like, do I want to stay in this teaching gig for the long term? Because up until then, I was like the whole freelance thing where like you teach some drum lines, you do some private teach hustle, you try to make in some sessions, like you try to do in like an LA musician
Hmm.
on the scene here. And it's funny because I actually that my first day that I started, um, I had gotten a call to go play on Dancing with the Stars, like go play Pan,
Mm.
and I had to turn it down because I was like, I can't miss my first day of teaching.
Mm.
So anyways, it was a period of I think 2018, 2019. I really was struggling with who am I? Uh, do I want to like? Because I think in my head I was afraid if I completely commit mentally to like I am a high school teacher, that means I have to give up on playing, which is not true. And I know that's not
Hmm.
true. I knew it wasn't true. I've always known that that is not true, but that's a stereotype of high school band directors,
Hmm.
you know? And I've seen a lot of people I know stop gigging and stopping because of the time demands of the teaching job,
Yeah.
which is nothing wrong with that. It's completely okay. I'm not dissing that. Me, I always in my head was like, okay, say to yourself, you're a performer first, teacher second, even if the actual week didn't reflect that. So long story short, I realized after talking with some friends and I therapist who I see, I've seen him for since about that time when I really at my low point, 2000, who they've all helped me to realize no, there's no comp, there's no reason why I have to pick one or the other, and there's
Hmm.
no why teaching makes me less of a performer and at all, and makes me a better teacher,
Hmm.
and I think because I see people who can go do recording sessions and like I can't do that because I teach full time. I have a day
Mm.
job of
Hmm.
teaching,
Hmm.
and I think that was more of what it was. I was comparing myself to a lot of my peers who I've seen in the LA scene, um, and everything. So back 13 years ago, in my head, it's like maybe if I do teach, it'll be like private teaching, but like the bulk of what I do will be performing because and uh, I was young and less experienced, and so I was wrong. Not, I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's just I've grown up. We have all grown up a lot, and 13 years is a long time between your undergrad and to your mid 30s. Like you change a lot as a person.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I
So
mean, one of the things I talked with another former Soci student, Owen Davis. I don't know. Do you know Owen? Nathan Owen
I
Davis?
I don't think so.
He's a percussionist in Arizona. Really great guy. We were chatting, and he was talking about similar thing, the sort of like building up of a narrative in your head as a way of like trying to make sense of the world ahead of you and how those narratives change over time. It's important to identify. Like that's why I asked the question, because one of the things I see a lot now, and maybe it's just because I see it online, and when I was a student, there was no like Facebook wasn't the thing it is now. It's not like we went online and we went online to show pictures of our coffee. Like that's as like deep as it went. And it morphed into this thing now where like you start to call people out on their careers, and you're sort of saying things you like and you don't like, and you're pointing specific people out and being like they're not doing it right. It's like it turned into this other thing. The whole time though, I'm like watching it, and I'm just like, I think you're 20 years old, and I don't think you know what you're talking about, but in your head this is what the narrative is, right? And the narrative that was told to me when I was in college was like you could go teach at a college, or you could teach at a high school, or you could play in an orchestra.
Same.
And teaching at a college, playing in the orchestra was the primary thing. That, or like getting a gig performing was the most respected. Teaching at a college was the next thing, and then teaching in a band was sort of like what you did if you didn't get the other two. You know,
Exactly.
and that narrative, it didn't come from a specific person. It was just sort of in the air. You know, like it's not like Larry Snyder sat me down and was like, you know, if you don't do that, like that's not at all what I was taught. But it was just in the air. So I had a similar thing. Like there was just like if I wasn't a steel drum studio musician like Tom Miller, then I'm not doing it right because Tom was a UA grad, and I was like, well, that's what you do. You know, if I wasn't playing in an orchestra like Tim Adams or Cynthia Ye, then well then, and I was like, I can't do that, so I'm kind of gonna can't worry about that. And then the other thing was like teaching at a college. I don't want to get my doctorate, so I'm kind of screwed there. I just sort of like it. I didn't have anything, and other than steel drum gigging, and that's when I got into Yale. And luckily, the chamber music thing, like the door was just open wide enough. I got into Yale, and then I met and now I'm doing the thing I'm doing. But I think my point is, had I subscribed to my early narrative early on, and then just been like, well, this is the way it is, and it's somebody else's fault, and this is shitty, like Amanda, you and I would not be talking right now, and I would probably be in a gutter, like, you know, eating trash. And so, anyway, there's no point to my story here other than to say, like, I just wish students would be a little bit more careful about their worldview narratives as sort of like this set in stone thing. Because, like, what I thought 4 hours ago is not what I think now, you know? And it's really tricky.
What I thought yesterday was not true anymore. I mean, let's be real. And right? I mean, that narrative, which I feel like, and this is coming from someone who is not in the university pedagogy setting. Like, I don't teach full time at a university. I'm studio faculty at a community college here.
Mm-hmm.
But my world, my daily interactions is with high school,
Yeah.
gigging, but not pedagogy. And I remember when I was first auditioning for colleges a million years, I wanted to be the principal percussionist of the LA Phil or like New York Phil. Like I was like, that's what I want to do. And also like continue to like play drums and everything and do, but like that was the dream. And teaching was never on the radar. I was like, I don't want to be a band director. Like I remember saying to my parents, like that was the last thing I wanted to be, was a high school band director.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look what happened. But also, you know, as you do in college and as a percussion major, and you get exposed to so many different styles of music, your view starts to expand and broaden a bit. And I remember when I decided I did not want to go the orchestral route seriously. It wasn't so much that I discovered what I wanted to do, but I was learning what I didn't want to do. And I had also begun teaching privately a little bit here and there. And Dr. Carney, again, he was the one who suggested, hey, maybe like try teaching, you know? And I did. And the more I started to teach, the more I discovered I enjoyed it. It's like, this student did something I told them to do, and they did better.
It's amazing,
That's cool.
right?
It's cool.
It's such a good feeling. I mean, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
It was like, it's fine. It's like, maybe I'm okay at this. And then I remember, so long story short, I remember the day when I was in a lesson with Dr. Carney, and it was, I think it was my beginning of my 5th year. By the way, I spent...
Wait, say that one more time. Sorry, you cut out.
I spent 6 years on my undergrad degree. It wasn't a double major. I didn't take off time. I just took...
Well, you're in good company. Owen was 5.5 years. I was almost 6 years with my student teaching, so you're in good company. You're fine.
Yeah. So I remember Dr. Carney sat me down, and I was talking to him about grad school because I was on the fence of whether I wanted to go or not. And he just sat me down and was like, you need to go to NIU for your master's degree, and then you need to go to USC and go get your DMA, and then go teach at a university, go become a professor. And that moment, I've remembered it so clearly ever since. I remember thinking, okay, all right, that's what I'm going to do. And it was never a thing where like I felt like he was pressuring me to do it. It never was like, well, I don't want to, but I'm going to do it because my teacher said so. No, I wanted to do it. It's just he saw there was a teacher in me before I did.
Hmm.
Now, and I went to NIU, of course, and had an amazing time. But I it was when I was at NIU decided I don't think I want a university professor just because as a teaching assistant you learn kind of what goes on in the background a little bit
Hmm.
behind the scenes, and it just didn't really feel like the right fit for me. And I mean, but it was an amazing program. I'm not bashing the program
Yeah,
at
yeah.
all. I mean, I Robert Chappell and there were fantastic teachers, as was Liam and Cliff, and I worked with Mia, and I met Yuko. I met so many people there.
Hmm.
But I thought, well, I don't think I want to be a university professor either. I love teaching, so maybe I'll just stop at my master's and I'll finish and I'll go back home to California and just kind of see what happens.
Hmm.
Um, and even now, sometimes I went through a period where I thought, well, maybe I'll go into ethnomusicology, and then I've realized, nah, it's a lot of writing. I'm not sure if I want to do that. Um, so it's interesting. It's kind of another long tangent. Going back to how there are these prescribed pathways, at least at the time when I were like if the 2000s, but like the first half of the 2000s especially, like the three prescribed paths: orchestral percussionist, professor, band director. And it's like anything else outside of that norm, you kind of are on your own. You got to forge your own path.
Hmm. Or you're wasting your degree. Like if you were just going to be a gigging musician, then like why did you spend that money? Like there was that sort of implied
Right.
thing.
And now, of course, being in gigging in the quote the real world, as if college isn't the real world, but I digress. And you work with people who not only did go to quote prestigious conservatories or like the big name schools or whatever, but they didn't even go to music school. Like they
Hmm.
just learned in the trenches
Yeah.
of for lack of a better terms, the music school of hard knocks, who are some of the top call players in the LA scene or whatever
Hmm.
scene that you're in.
Hmm.
Uh, it really is just like it's got their own path. And I've had some students over the years who I've only had maybe at the most five in all the years that I taught who've got music majors, and I've always sat them down and had a real hard talk with them and be like, do you understand what you're getting yourself into?
Hmm.
And than that, I've had students who have continued their musical experiences and growth and their passions music majors, and I tell them you don't need to. In fact, don't be a music major unless you have a really good reason why you
Hmm.
do it.
Hmm.
And not bashing music majors, but it's just to the back to the fact of it's just a piece of paper. You need a piece of paper to continue to play music
Hmm.
at a high level.
Yeah. Well, what can I ask you? Like, um, you talk about having the hard talk with your students. Like, what are some other things that? And I'm gonna ask a clumsy question, so forgive me. But like, one of the conversations that's been in the air a lot, uh, for 5 years now around the Me Too stuff is the experience of women in different fields. And I am not a woman, as you can clearly see. But like, and so I'm ignorant to. I have been sorry. I'm fortunate. I'm ignorant to a lot of the issues because I think I'm identifying that I've been fortunate to have been. I was taught by a very strong woman starting in fifth grade named Joan Wenzel, who started me on the steel band path. And so like I had examples early on of like just badass ladies in my life who she could still play circles around me. Going to grad school and some of my teachers there and my hearing teacher at Yale, Joan Panetti, is like one of my heroes and changed my life. Ayano Katoka, who's a badass percussionist. I was in school with her and now Gwen Dees, and so like when I hear people say like people say this about women drummers. I'm like, what kind of dumb ass would ever think, like, they don't know Ayano clearly. Like, it's totally crazy to me that anybody would think that, but I'm trying to acknowledge, like, the particular path I've been on. I feel like it's never even been a possibility to talk about that stuff because I've just been around bad motherfuckers my whole life, and so like I'm sure I've missed stuff that Ayano and Gwen had to deal with that I didn't. But I'm kind of curious, like, is what part of your conversations with students, or even yourself, and like how you view this stuff in terms of gender and the way to navigate the field, like, what are some of the, where's your head at been with that stuff recently? If you've been dealing, thinking about it in any particular way, you can tell me. But I'm just kind of curious to hear your side of that.
Yeah, I am very lucky in that all of the men who have taught me have been they were nothing but supportive
Mm-hmm.
and uh, nurturing and just incredible examples of not just musicians, but exemplary people as well. I've actually never had a woman percussion teacher who was
Really?
like a full-time percussion teacher ever. I never have. All
Wow. Okay.
my main percussion teachers have been men. It's not to say I've not studied some things with some women. In fact, I remember we were talking about music before. The Led Zeppelin family,
Mm-hmm.
the program at Cal Arts years ago, and Dr. Carney had studied with Kobla Led Zeppelin. But one of my teachers when we did Airway music was Yuko Led Zeppelin Cole, who she is a beast
Mm-hmm.
of a just everything. I mean, she was officially like the dance teacher for us in music, but I mean, of course she could sing everything. She could drum. Was a beast. I remember one time led a rehearsal all by herself, and I think it was her daughter who was a newborn at the time. It was years ago. She had her strapped on her back, and she just went around doing all the. She's a beast.
Well, she's like, I carried this kid in my belly for 9 months and did this. So like putting him in a backpack is actually objectively easier. So I'm just going to do that.
I know. Yeah. So Yucca was a big influence. And just seeing like very frankly, a really strong woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like taking names. And I've mostly had a pretty good experience being a woman in very male dominated field, although over the years it's becomes less so every day. But I remember when I was I went to 2 high schools, and my first I remember I was the only girl my freshman year when I was in drumline. And
did they make you play all the bell parts?
actually no, well I was in drum, they let me be in drumline, which was great. A lot of the stuff that came out with you, all the years ago, I experienced a lot of that stuff when I was a freshman, when I was a 14-year-old girl, like hearing guys shoot discussions. I don't want to say on the podcast, but they did that in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And this little naive 14-year-old girl who doesn't know anything, I'm the only one there. And I knew something was wrong. They were talking to me about me in front of me. I didn't know how to deal with it. And, of course, my parents were amazing. My mom went to bat for me, as any mom, most moms I'm sure would.
Yeah.
But my second high school was better. And then in college, again, but support from all of my teachers and also all of the other guys in the studio, at Long Beach. They were we're like a family. They're like my brothers.
It was pretty well at the University of Akron. There were, I think when I was there were 3 or 4 women in the studio, and when the Me Too sort of era. Well, I want to say era, like this has been an issue for a long time. But when that sort of hit the skids, I was like, oh my god! Like I was like thinking back to like my friends Lisa and Daphne, and like, what did I? And I think back, I'm like, no, it was pretty equal opportunity. Like it was like she gave it right back to me. Like I feel okay. I think if I want to text Daphne and ask her, but I think but that not to say like in that there's a line, and like there's a difference between family and like exclusion from a conversation, you know, and it can get
Yeah,
it's a fine line.
exactly. Yes. And it's funny you say that, like, hit right back. Of course, like, you know, I've heard the way guys talk, and like when I'm in that environment, I feel like if I needed to, I can throw it back at them. And it also helped that I have a brother. So, and so
You know
I've always,
enough.
and I've all, I all when I think I tended to get on better with guys than
Hmm.
girls
Hmm.
for whatever reason. It's not that I didn't have any friends who were girls. I did, but I think it was the tomboy in me, because I was a really, really big tomboy for
Hmm.
my whole childhood. So I just was always around guys more. So, but you're right. I mean, and at the end of the day, like I feel like at NIU as well, if any of us women in the percussion studio were or harassed in any way, the other guys in the studio would come to bat for us and would be like,
Right.
they would step in and put down the guy who
Hmm.
was, they would be there for us. They'd be very protective.
Hmm.
Um, Again, not that we can't hold our own weight and like we can protect ourselves, but it's like they were just like, you don't mess with them. Like they are one of us.
Yeah.
Like they are
Yeah.
part of our family. You do not mess with family.
Yeah, and it becomes, I think I'm guilty of going too far the other direction. Where like when we were in, we were in Trinidad last year before the COVID lockdown. Shelby Blesinger McKay went with. Do you know Shelby? She's a great lead pimp. Do you know her at all?
I've heard the name. I don't think I've ever met her, but I the
She's
name
awesome. She's awesome,
before.
and but I've been to Trinidad enough, and I've had Cliff in my ear about how women are sometimes treated in Trinidad, and he's like very protective of any woman that he knows that goes to Trinidad, like a student of his, a friend of his. He's always like, "Be careful," you know. And when we went down, there was I'm very protective of my friends in general, but we go to Trinidad. I was just like, all right, I got to watch out for Shelby, and there was a point where like the four of us were like a protective male cocoon around her the whole time, and it was like she wasn't in our face about it, but there was a point where she just disappeared, and I was like, oh yeah, she's avoiding the male cocoon. Like we're being overprotective and over like caring about Shelby, where we let the male bubble disappear for a while, and she hooked up with some other lady friends in the steel band, and she was in a female cocoon at that point, and it was totally fine. It was just the male cocoon of us four dum dums and so like we were gonna be able to help her in any real like physical altercation anyway. Like we'd all crumble in a heartbeat. But yeah, you can go the other way too hard on that front too.
True. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and having said all that, have I experienced misogyny? Oh, of course. It's bad. And actually, I find it doesn't happen when I'm a percussionist. When it does happen, it is when I'm around other instrumentalists,
Mm, mm.
like on gigs, and it's always, again, like where it's like you have to prep twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. Men, if we make one mistake, oh well, she just can't play. Oh, she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really know. She's not really serious.
Yeah.
So of course that happens, but I feel lucky enough in that I've not had major um confrontation is the right word, or episode,
Yeah.
but thus far I've been very privileged and very lucky to have avoided any huge, like, life-changing abuse of any kind,
Mm-hmm.
mental, physical, anything,
Yeah.
emotional, within the percussion world.
Yeah, and it's again like I asked the question just to sort of I'm curious how I mean I kind of feel like we've reached the goal when there's enough women in a percussion studio where you all are chatting like women chat and it freaks the guys out. Like, listen, I haven't hung with you, but I'm married to a woman who's friends with a lot of women. I know Shelby. She's a woman. She's also friends with other women. I've spent time as the only man around a lot of women. When you all get rolling, boy, look out. And like, it's a different vibe than a cohort of men saying stuff. But like, I feel like the goal is if you can get some male in a studio somewhere to be like, I'm a little uncomfortable with this. Like, then I feel like we're at the true diversity. We've made it.
We equal it out. There we equal it out. There you go. That's what we need. That's what we need.
Yeah, we've come along in my lifetime. It's hard. One of the things I feel like we as humans don't do very well is acknowledge progress. Like, we have negativity bias. We just see nothing but the problems. And the objectifiably provable data is that you walk into a percussion studio now in Dover, Ohio, where I grew up, the demographics are going to be different.
Totally.
First of all, more percussionists can read music. I couldn't read pitches till my senior year in high school. I'm not blaming my teacher on that. It was just that was in the air. I was Mr. Holland's Opus. Boom, 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 boom. Somebody's hit me with a football helmet. That was me. And here I am teaching at Princeton and NYU. Like, so that's just to say that the generation coming behind me is now much more armed for stuff. And I'll bet if you went, you would see more boys playing the glockenspiel. The flute player in my marching band, there was 2 girls in my percussion section. Both of them played cymbals. We didn't even let them play the glockenspiel. We had the flute player come up and play the Glock parts. Because the flute player was the only one who could read. And then if it was a trumpet part on the Glock, we had to have the trumpet player come because they could only be the only persons to read the transposing B-flat stuff. Like, as a man at 18 years old, I was like, transposing? You're crazy. Like
what's that?
But now, that was 1997, 98. Now it's 2021. Things are objectively different. So I wanted to put a pin in there that like, it moves slower than I want it to, but it's definitely better to be a percussionist now than it was in 1998, I think.
Totally, yeah. And I even think about my own students now, like being a teacher. It is not lost on me that my program, again, it's majority guys, and I am a woman leading them. So the only experience they've had, it's like you with Joan. Experience that a lot my guys have had is having a woman as their teacher. Like, that's just normal. And I have a lot of female students, and that is 2 things about that. It's normal that I almost never give it a second. Oh, well, of course I have a lot of female students in my program, but also like I am mindful that they are. Their example, their teacher, the person that they're watching is a woman just like that, or who I was in their shoes, there's always a little part of me that, even though like, I don't let stuff fly in my classroom. Like, if there was any funny business, I stop it. They're really in every, but I watch out for my female students because of my experience when I was 14, and like, all the guys in drumline talking about the things they wanted girls.
The things
that they had
what?
crushes on. They wanted things that they wanted to do to girls. The way that teenage boys talk about girls that they like graphic. Yeah.
In my day, we used to just say we hated that girl, and that meant we loved that girl. Like, that's all it was.
See, that's normally
that was
how
as
it
dark
is,
as it got
right?
with me when
I
I was
know.
a kid.
Yeah.
She's ugly. No, she's
like,
not. She's super attractive.
It's like, but you can't. But your friends know that.
Yeah. But you got to say the thing. You got to do the thing. You got to jump through the hoops as a young man.
That's
At least in 1998, that was the vibe. I'm sure now things are different now, but.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so meaning, anyways, yeah, I sometimes I think about these things, and I'm just happy that female students get to have the teacher that I never got to have,
Well,
because I tried. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the other thing, too, is that I think you pointing out, like, me having Joan Wenzel as a teacher in 5th grade then made it exponentially easier to have a female English teacher, and then to have a female science teacher, and then to have it I'm reading all these things now about like the lack of women, and I like read like astrophysics books and stuff on the side. Like, I love quantum entanglement. I don't understand it, but I love it.
That's so cool, by the way.
Yeah, like that stuff that fascinates me. But like, there's one book I found of a female physicist, and it's like, yeah, there's just not a lot in that field. But, you know, to me, that's confusing because I grew up with lots of strong female teachers. But I think if you only ever had strong male teachers until you got to your senior year in high school and then you had a physics professor, like, I wish it wasn't the case, but I think there's like, well, I've never had, like, this hasn't been that way before. Like, you automatically put up like a wall. And I don't always know if it's like I don't trust women. It's just like this isn't like the other things, you know. But for me, like I trust women, like because you know, if you just have it early on and you have a great experience, like then all of those kids who are studying with you now in fifth grade or at high school, when they go and they have a physics professor who's a female, and they start talking about things that Stephen Hawking has been talking about for 30 years. Like, Stephen Hawking is a man, but he's a disabled man who couldn't speak, yet he gets more credit than the females who can, you know, like who are saying the same things, you know? And
Yeah.
so anyway, I'm just saying that I think for better or worse, you are doing the Lord's work, and that is the stuff that in 15 years is going to change the demographics, I think, more than just coming out and being like, there's no women here. Like, yeah, okay, we'll do something about it. And I just want to say, like, you're doing something about it in a way that is just doing the work. And I just want to put a pin in that because I think it's important, and I think I don't think you're underestimating it, but don't underestimate. Check in with those male kids 15 years from now. And I would put my life savings on it that their worldviews are going to be more nuanced because they talked about eighth notes with you in eighth grade, and because you
yeah.
didn't present it to them as hi, I'm giving you the female viewpoint here. Like Joan Wenzel never said that to me. She just played me under the table every goddamn time I walked in there, you know. And I was like, well, fuck, I can't. This is another human being that I can't play better than. And so like that's all it was, you know. It wasn't a male female thing. It was just like shit.
I mean, I don't think I've ever once talked about the fact that I'm a woman teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just teach and I just play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just I happen to be female, and of course in my head that makes no difference. So therefore, it's not you know, I don't talk about it. Like I don't bring it up. It's not like a point of like, I'm gonna be female viewpoint on this. Like of course you're gonna get that big woman, but it's not because I'm saying that. Like I'm announcing it to the world.
Well, I want to sort of couch all of this, or just clarify or qualify a little bit that like there are absolute, if for the people out there for whom their worldview includes the thought women cannot play as strong as men, women can't get the sound that men can get, women shouldn't be in charge of this because men have better, like those people, get out. There's no time. I don't have time for that. Like, you're wrong, and that's just not. We're talking about any woman and any man can make any sound they want. Why? Because Ayano Katoka is 3'6", and she weighs 93 pounds, and she can play louder than me and bigger than me on any given day. And I just was taught that when I was 21. I just was like, well, that's the truth now. And like I just have to assume that's the way it's going to be for the rest of my life. And I just wish, it's the same with going into a steel band. You go into a steel band in Trinidad, you see 70% of the people playing bass are women. It's one of the most physically demanding parts of the steel band. Yet, it's a woman-dominated section. Almost to a band. I mean, it's, yes, it varies year to year, but compared to any other section in the band, there is a shitload of women who play bass. There's panoramas written about it, for God's sakes, you know.
Women, yes. Yep.
So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I remember just when I went to play with Silver Stars 5 years ago, I was like, okay, it's full of women, cool.
The bass section is always my favorite section. It's where like if I'm drilling a band in Trinidad or in Brooklyn, I really try to make a point to go spend a lot of time and build a relationship with the bass section, because they're the people on the fringes of the band physically. They feel like they're the least seen and heard people in the band, yet they're the most interesting people in the band. Like the person who's in the bass rack behind the engine room, that's the person I want to talk to. Like that person who's just raging back there and no one ever sees them. It's like, you've got something that I don't think I have. I don't think I can commit to playing a part that well when no one knows I'm there. And anyway, just to say, well, Amanda, this has been really fun, and I know that we only just scratched the surface here, and I've stolen an hour and 44 seconds of your life. But my door is always open, and I would love to chat with you again on another podcast if you're up for it. Just reach out to me, but don't hesitate to be like, "Hey, dum dum, I messaged you 3 days ago and you haven't responded." Okay, can you promise me?
Sure, for sure. I'll call you out, Josh. No worries.
Call me out privately 3 times. You got to call me out privately 3 times, and then you can go public with it if that's okay.
Okay, fourth time we'll go. All right.
It's like when you offer to pay for dinner and somebody denies you 3 times. To offer a 4th time is rude. Just take it public at the 4th time, okay?
Yep, I got to call the guy out at that point.
Well, Amanda, where can folks, if they want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing, where can they find you online?
Yeah, well, I am on Instagram at Duncan percussion, and I technically have a Twitter. I don't really do anything with it. I just have it so I can read other people's tweets. It's the same handle if you really want to follow me. Both my accounts are private because as a high school teacher, I have social media private.
Oh, is that right? They make you do that?
Yes, yeah, it's actually contractual. We can't have any interactions with students on social media. Well, because they're minors.
That is smart.
Yeah. So, yeah. So just and and it's also like I do the same thing too. Like, I'd like to keep my life and the rest of my life separate, and that also goes online. So
I am gonna go. And
my account.
I'm gonna go and block all of my NYU students on social media right now.
Well, I think it's different. It's different in university because
I don't think so. The more
well, yeah, but they're legal adults. Like my students, like legally they're minors. Like I can't. Like I don't know. Like I don't want to be.
I'm gonna say
my rule is they have to be 18 and they have to be graduated.
But
so.
my now that I'm 41, and I look back on myself at 21, yes, you're technically legal, but you're not an adult.
That's true. That's a good point. And I'm 35 now, and it's like the older the older we get, the more I'm like, God, those are young kids at 22. God, they're babies.
There's a great quote.
Some ways.
There's a great quote by Michael Rosen. He talks about like the thing about teaching is like you get older, but they're always 18. They're never not 18, and they all come in and it's the same thing every year. He's like, here's how you do your snare drum roll. Oh great, you got a girlfriend and you found your armpit hair. Awesome.
Or like, and you're going through your first big breakup. Oh, God.
Yeah. It's like, oh, well, Amanda, this was really lovely. I appreciate it. And like I said, the door's always open. I enjoyed chatting with you. And I hope, I don't know when So's coming out to California next, but if we do, I would love to chat and hang out and grab a beer and shoot the shit in person.
That would be great, Josh. And I'm perpetually trying to get myself to New York, and I would love to go do Brooklyn Panorama one of these years. It's always hard to try to find time to get out there, but I just want to go. And when the day comes that I'm finally in New York, I'll hit you up.
Please do, and please join. Please come out for Panorama. That is a good time, and you won't regret it. So I'm
trying to do it.
I get it. I know it's hard. I live in Connecticut, and it's hard to get to New York, so I can imagine. So, but well, listen, Amanda, stay healthy, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you again in the future. All right. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in Pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandre Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.